The quiet after she said it was the loudest sound I have ever heard. It filled the fellowship hall of St. Luke's, pressing against the white tablecloths, the folding chairs, the half-eaten sugar cookies. My stepdaughter, Emily, stood with her wedding binder clutched to her chest like armor, her chin raised, her eyes steady on mine. 28 years old, hair in a perfect, severe bun. The greatest gift for my wedding, she said, clear as a bell, would be if you disappeared from our family forever. I turned to my wife, Karen, 12 years. I searched her face for the laugh, the dismissal, the defense. It wasn't there. Instead, she gave a small, ordinary nod. It was the quietest, most violent sound I had ever heard, the soft click of a door closing deep inside my chest. 3 weeks later, they would stand screaming in this same hall, staring at the wreckage, wondering how it all fell apart so fast. But in that moment, I just breathed in. I counted to 3. I didn't beg. I didn't rage. I looked at this woman I had helped raise from a scowling 16-year-old and said, "All right." She blinked, as if she'd expected anything but that. My name is Tom Gallagher. I was 56 that spring in Maple Grove, an electrician with 34 years of cold basements and a permanent hum in my hands. Karen and I built a life on a quiet cul-de-sac in a house with my down payment and our shared mortgage. Emily called it the family home, especially when planning her wedding events there. I showed up. That's what I did. When her real father vanished, I didn't try to be him. I was just there, for flat tires, for driver's ed in the high school lot, my foot hovering over the brake as she learned to parallel park my F-150. She called me Tom, then Dad, then, somewhere along the line, nothing at all. The wedding consumed everything. I paid the deposits without complaint. You invest in the people you love. The church meeting was for final details, head counts, seating charts. Emily finished with her throat clearing, the prelude to a carefully rehearsed grenade. "I don't want any awkwardness," she began, looking first to her mother. "You're not really my dad. It would mean a lot if you just stepped back, completely." Then, the final cut. "The greatest gift would be if you disappeared." And Karen's nod. I remember the clock then. Tick, tick, tick. "All right," I said again. That night, I packed a duffel bag. Karen watched from the doorway. "Tom," she said, and then nothing more. I left my keys on the counter beside the wedding binder. I slept in my truck behind a Perkins, the smell of bacon grease haunting the air. By morning, my phone was a hive of confused messages. I drove to work, pulled wire, tightened screws. The world didn't end because my marriage had. At lunch, I opened the mortgage app, looked at the insurance policy, the deed. "Disappear," she'd said. All right, but disappearing isn't vanishing. It's the careful removal of a load-bearing wall. It's stepping aside so those left behind finally feel the weight of what they asked to carry alone. I didn't go in anger. I felt hollow, scooped out. I drove past the real estate office, then to the credit union. Inside, it smelled of carpet cleaner. I reviewed the joint accounts, checking, savings, the wedding fund, with a calm that felt alien. I didn't close them. Not yet. I just learned. The cheap motel bed sagged. I stared at the ceiling and thought of the house, the creak on the third stair, the ghost of Karen's shampoo. I thought of a 16-year-old Emily, white-knuckling the steering wheel. "Easy," I'd said. "You've got time." Had I? I returned for my toolbox. A photo of my father, an old flannel jacket. I left the wedding album, the matching mugs. The binder sat on the counter, a monument to a future I was no longer part of. I closed it gently. Karen found me there. "You're really doing this?" "I am. You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm stepping back, like you wanted." Her mouth opened, then shut. "Emily didn't mean." "She meant it," I said. "And you agreed." A flicker in her eyes then, not anger, but the first tremor of understanding. She had set something in motion she could no longer control. The calls escalated. Emily's fury, Karen's pleading. I met with Dave Miller, a realtor I'd known for years. "Over burnt coffee," I said. "I need to sell, clean and fast." "You know what that means?" "I do." Signing the papers was just a formality. The decision was already made in that silent hall. Karen came to the motel, her eyes bright with accusation. You're tearing everything down. For what? For myself. A brittle laugh. You think this ends well? I think it ends, I said. The for sale sign was a silent earthquake. My phone erupted. The wedding venue called. Confused. Disappear, they'd said. So I was, quietly, legally, pulling out the nails one by one and letting the structure sag. The house went live on a Thursday. Dave sent the listing. The lawn looked impossibly green. I felt nothing but a deep, abiding tiredness. That night, Karen texted. Emily's in tears. You're humiliating her. Home, she wrote in another, please. But home was a word that had come loose. I thought of shoveling the driveway at dawn so she wouldn't slip, of replacing the furnace myself, of Emily's laughter in the kitchen, a sound that never worried about bills or heat or the man who made it all possible. At the county records office, under sickly fluorescent lights, the clerk confirmed it. My name was first on the deed. The wedding venue called again, polite and firm, without confirmation from the homeowner. We can't proceed. I understand, I said. My hands shook when I hung up, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of reality. Back on a ladder, rewiring a strip mall light, my hands worked on muscle memory. Strip, twist, cap. My body knew its purpose, even when my mind was adrift. Emily texted. You're ruining everything. You always make it about you. I remembered driving 2 hours in a snowstorm when her car broke down in college. You're my hero, she'd said, half joking. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my insurance agent and had my name removed from the policy. Karen found me in the motel parking lot, standing by my truck. You're hurting Emily. I didn't start this. You're her father. I was, I said gently, until I wasn't. She leaned in, her voice a hissed whisper. If you keep going, there's no coming back. I met her eyes. You already decided that. You just didn't think I'd accept it. She stepped back as if struck. The first offer came in under asking. Dave was cautious. We can counter. Accept it, I said. The finality was a physical weight. I thought of her wedding dress, still hanging in the spare room closet on the rod I'd installed, waiting for a day that was now dissolving like mist. Alone in the motel, I took out my wallet, a faded photo, Emily at 17, grinning behind the wheel of my truck, radiant with a future she believed I was part of. Down the hall, a vending machine hummed a lonely, steady song. I sat in the silence I had been given, and I held it. The final papers sat between us on the conference table. Dave, the realtor, tapped the stack into a perfect square. That's it, he said, voice low. That's it. The pen made a soft, unremarkable scratch. That was all it took. 12 years of mortgage payments, of shoveling snow at dawn, of watching Emily scroll her phone on the porch while I mowed the lawn she called the family home. Gone with a signature. Outside, the world was ordinary. A minivan honked. A man argued with his phone. Life, utterly indifferent. Dave's hand was warm on my shoulder. You all right? I will be. And for the first time, I believed it. My phone rang before I reached the end of the block. Karen's voice was a tight wire. What did you do? I sold the house. You can't. I did. A silence. Then a collapse into something softer. Desperate. The venue just called. They canceled the rehearsal dinner. They said they can't proceed without the property. I saw it instantly. Emily in the kitchen. Phone to her ear. The color-coded binder open. Her perfect timeline unraveling. I'm sorry, I said. And I was, for the dream, not the choice. You're destroying her, Karen cried. No, I corrected, my voice calm as still water. I've stepped out of the frame. You're seeing what was always in the picture. By afternoon, it was a cascade. The florist, the band, the caterer's voicemail asking who owed the balance. The call from the unknown number came as I sat in my truck. You sold the house, Emily screamed, the words vibrating with pure fury. Are you insane? I told you I was disappearing. You did this to punish me. Yes, the admission was clean, sharp, but not as punishment, as a consequence. You asked for an absence. This is the shape of it. A choked sound. Then the line went dead. Karen came that night. She sat on the motel bed, a collapsed version of herself, staring at the worn carpet. She's humiliated. She whispered. Everyone knows. Everyone knew I existed, too, I said, until you both decided I shouldn't. Her red-rimmed eyes lifted to mine. I never thought you'd go this far. I never thought you'd nod, I replied. The air in the room went perfectly still. 2 days later, the new owners held an open house, balloons on the mailbox, strangers wandering through the ghost of my life. Emily showed up, the neighbors told me later, raised voices, a slammed door, a woman sobbing on the front steps while people politely looked away. That night, a text lit up my screen. Tom, it's Rick from next door, just checking in. Didn't seem right you not being around. I stared at those words. A neighbor had noticed my absence before my own family had. The wedding was postponed the following Monday. Emily posted online about toxic people and boundaries. Karen's messages stopped. I moved to a small rental, 1 bedroom, thin walls, a porch just big enough for a chair. The first night, I sat in the silence. It didn't feel empty, it felt earned. They thought the story was over. They were wrong. On the morning the buyers took possession, I visited the empty house one last time. The rooms echoed, smelling of lemon cleaner and dust. I brought a single, black binder and placed it on the kitchen counter, right over the faint scratch from my dropped screwdriver years ago. On the spine, in block letters, what disappears? Inside, under clear tabs, was a quiet, meticulous accounting, every mortgage payment, utility bill, insurance premium, the $6,800 for braces, the $14,900 venue deposit, the florist, the band, the alterations, gas money from college trips, the winter I covered her rent. Just facts, numbers on a page, the architecture of a life built in silence. On top, I left a sealed envelope for Emily. I didn't linger, I walked out, the echo of my footsteps the only farewell. The call came that afternoon. It was Mark, Emily's fiancé, his voice strained. What is this? Open it. I heard the rustle of paper, a sharp intake of breath. Jesus. In the background, Karen wept. Emily's voice rose, shrill. This is manipulation. He planned this. I took the phone. I documented it. There's a difference. You're trying to shame us, Karen cried. I'm showing you the truth, I said. For the first time. They were in the empty house. Sunlight would be falling on the counter where the binder lay open. I imagined Emily's finger tracing the columns of numbers, the reality dawning, not as a feeling, but as a sum. At the back of the binder was my letter. Emily. You asked me to disappear. This is what disappears when I do. There's no anger here, just accounting. I hope your wedding day is still beautiful. I won't be there to see it. Tom. On the phone, Mark's voice was heavy. Did you know about all this? He asked Emily. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. Later, Rick filled in the gaps. How Emily threw the binder, how the pages scattered like leaves, how Mark slowly gathered them, his face pale, how the neighbors watched from a respectful distance, pieces of the story clicking quietly into place. I always thought Tom paid for everything. He did. By evening, the truth had spread, not as gossip, but as simple, irrefutable arithmetic. Karen's final call came that night. I let it ring. Her last text arrived an hour later. I wish you'd fought harder. My reply was simple. I did. Quietly. For years. That was the end. Fall turned the world. I drank my coffee by a new window. My hands still buzzed with a lifetime's current, but I slept through the night. Rick visited my porch one October afternoon. A lot of folks saw, he said. They don't talk about it, but they saw what you did with the truth. After he left, I understood something new. Respect often arrives quietly, long after the noise has faded. Karen came once more. Near Thanksgiving, she stood on my step, diminished. You seem different, she said, looking past me into my small, sovereign space. I am. She gave that same, small nod. This time, it was just emotion. It held no power. I hope you're happy. I'm at peace. She turned and left, and I felt nothing. This winter, I own a small house outright. The porch is mine. The quiet is mine. Sometimes I think of Emily with a distant sadness. I hope she learned, But that chapter is no longer mine to edit. They asked for a ghost. What they got was a reckoning. They demanded an absence, never realizing they were standing in the hollow space I had long filled, the space where a foundation quietly, relentlessly, holds everything up. When you finally choose yourself, it isn't an explosion. It's the deep, settling calm after a storm has passed. It is the understanding that the strongest thing you can build is a life that doesn't require you to disappear in order to belong.